Good morning. Welcome to Matenaer On Air. So very happy to have you along with us. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, and Calvin Butenhoff coming to you from our studio in downtown Waukesha. You can always join the show. You can call, text at 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842. Or if you're watching on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter, you can leave a comment there as well. Very excited about today.
Yeah.
We talked to Gunnar Raymer a couple of weeks ago, who works with Republican voters against Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did talk to a Wisconsin voter a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking to Tom, who is also from Wisconsin and has one of his testimonials up on their website. And it's very easy to find. It's Republican Voters Against Trump.com.
Yeah.
But we're going to be talking to him at 10:50 to find out what it was, because as I understand it, he's been a lifelong Republican, has always voted for Republicans. And this time he is not going to vote for Donald Trump. So we'll talk to Tom a little bit and find out where his evolution came along and what it was that finally made him say, yeah, I can't do that anymore. And then now we are doing public service announcements every Wednesday.
Correct.
Dr. Lyerly, of course, is running in the 8th Congressional District, so she is no longer able to be with us, but she has turned the speculum over to Dr. Lori Hanks, who's going to join us now Wednesdays at 11:33. And if you ever have a question for Dr. Hanks, and it doesn't only have to be OBGYN related, it can be anything. If you have questions about measles or you name it.
Men, if you have questions that have to do with men's health,
yes,
you can ask those as well.
Absolutely. You can call, you can text, you can also shoot an email to us at janesays@civicmedia.us, JANESAYS, janesays@civicmedia.us. We're going to start things off, though, talking about, you think things are dysfunctional here in Wisconsin. Tennessee has been going crazy.
I mean, if there has never been a hold my beer moment.
It's just remarkable what's been going on in Tennessee the last certainly year and a half. I don't expect all of you to be up on this. This is, again, where we swim and read a lot about these things. But March 27th was the 1-year anniversary of the Covenant School shooting in Tennessee. And since that time, concerned parents and students and other even Democratic lawmakers have been trying to get some measures passed for gun safety in Tennessee. And a vast majority of Tennesseans agree on some of these very basic measures: universal background checks, red flag laws. These aren't extreme. Nobody's coming to take your guns. And yet, what did the Tennessee Senate Republicans do yesterday?
I bet you it was an amazing and very logical idea.
They passed legislation allowing public school teachers, K through 12, and school staff to carry concealed handguns on school grounds. Despite numerous vocal protests from Covenant School families. The families who were affected by this and lost children and lost a spouse or a sister. Yep, the measure passed 26-5 in a vote that fell along party lines. Discussion over the bill stopped because there was a group of about 200 gun safety advocates who were voicing their opposition. Some were holding signs. Some of them snapped their fingers when they agreed. And then ultimately they got tossed out of there anyway.
Yeah.
He did allow a group of mothers of Covenant School students to stay, saying they did not cause a disruption. It's just so sad. Beth Gebhardt, whose son and daughter attended the Covenant School in Nashville, said her kids were there last spring as a gunman killed 3 9-year-olds and 3 staff members. She watched the proceedings Tuesday, this is from the Tennessean, with tears in her eyes. She staunchly opposes the bill. She said her kids, 9-year-old Ava and 12-year-old Hudson, survived the attack because of well-trained teachers and police officers doing their jobs. She says she can't imagine a teacher having to also deal with confronting a gunman, especially one who might have a far superior weapon as opposed to a handgun. As she said, a handgun will do nothing against an assault-style rifle If what happened on March 27th had gone down the way that it did with a teacher armed with a handgun trying to put the gunman out, my kids would likely be dead.
I've got a lot of friends who are teachers, and not a single one of them thinks, whether it's Tennessee or any other state that tries to do this, they never think that putting guns in the hands of teachers, staff, janitors, anyone is going to help them at all. I mean, they're too busy. Like, their job is to protect the children, and that means usually locking themselves in the room with the children
Yes.
and being the first one there in case the gunman comes to the door. Not to stalk down the hallways and try to take them down like it's Die Hard. This is ridiculous. And I asked you before, in the face of all these parents who've lost children and family who've lost other members, like teachers, or how is it that they come to this notion that the best idea is just to say, well, if we just give them guns, problem solved? I mean, are you also going to pay for training, licensure, all of those
Oh, we'll
things?
get to that because there will be some requirements. There aren't a lot of requirements for this.
I doubt there will be. I'm
And
not
and
surprised.
the other thing too, don't we ask enough of our teachers the way it is? They're not only counselors and have to be mental health experts and nutrition experts.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have so many demands of our teachers at this point, and now we're going to put this extra burden and responsibility on them. I don't think that's fair.
I have an idea. You know what? You want to give a teacher a gun, the moment they have to carry a gun, you also have to pay them the average salary of your police officers, because that's what you're making them do. You're making them be an educator and a patrol person, and then they should be making the same amount of money as for both jobs.
855-75 Civic, 855-752-4842 if you want to join the conversation. Bill from Oconomowoc is on the line. Good morning, Bill. Thank you so much for joining us. What do you want to say?
Thank you, first of all, for what you do for educating the voters. Second of all, when it comes to the red states, especially Tennessee, reality smacks these people in the face and breaks their nose, and they stand up and said, "My nose isn't broken, and you didn't smack me in the face." They don't deal in reality. They deal in fantasy. They deal in everything but reality and American justice. They fear American justice. They'll wrap their heads around why a man can compete against a woman, but they won't wrap their heads around why are people being mass murdered by weapons. They won't get into that. And why won't they get into it? Because it's part of their agenda. They are so warped and so sick. It's demonic how these people think. It's actually like the devil himself just controls them because they have no concept of right and wrong. They don't. They can't think that way. It's beyond them. And the red states across the country are states of big disasters, whether it's mass murder, whether it's all kinds of problems. They have the worst. The blue states are a lot better across the board. But as far when it comes to guns, let's ask them, well, if that's how you deal with guns, maybe we should deal with alcoholism the same way. Let's give plenty of alcohol to alcoholics, and that'll solve alcoholism, right?
Yeah. You know what, Bill? And Jon Stewart said something very, very similar to what you just said. And this is going back a number of months when he still had his show on Apple Plus. But he was talking to an Oklahoma gun advocate and a lawmaker in Oklahoma. And he essentially, who doesn't want any restrictions, there should be no restrictions of any kind for the Second Amendment. Anybody, whether they have mental health problems, doesn't matter. Anyone should have access to a gun. And Jon Stewart said, if guns make us safer, and we have 400 million guns now in this country, if guns make us safer, when does that kick in?
Yeah.
When do we become safer? When are we going to start seeing the results of all of these weapons that we have and that we're so much safer because of it?
And something, thank you so much for calling, Bill.
Yes, always, Bill.
When you say red states, I'd like to clarify, those red states contain people like these teachers and these parents and these family members who agree with us, who agree with background checks and agree with, I want to say, red state lawmakers, because they're the ones pushing these things through. I'm sure there are voters in Tennessee who agree with it.
Oh, yeah.
Who say, yes, absolutely. Give them 4 guns. give them ankle guns. But we have to also remember there are people in Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, all of these quote unquote red states who do believe in these basic common sense gun reforms. They're not crazy, as Jane has said before and again. We're not coming for your guns. We just want to make it a little bit easier. And making it easier does not mean putting those guns in the hands of teachers who aren't trained. We got a text from the 920 says highly trained police and military personnel struggle to take down shooters in real life combat encounters. How in God's name do we expect a teacher who will have substantially less training fare any better in these circumstances?
Look at what happened in Uvalde.
Yeah.
Look at what happened in Uvalde. How many law enforcement officers did they have there?
Lots.
There were more than 50.
Yeah. And they stood outside.
And they stood outside as those kids got slaughtered.
Yeah.
So you're right. And now we expect our teachers to step into this.
Yeah. It kind of goes to show how little you do respect teachers. You're like, you get to put your life in harm's way. They would easily put their lives in harm's way for their children.
Oh, yeah.
But what you're doing is you're making it so much worse. You're not giving them the resources. A gun isn't a resource.
Senator Paul Bailey, who's a Republican who was the Senate sponsor of the bill, also confirmed teachers would not need to disclose that they are carrying.
Huh?
So now parents won't even know who's carrying.
Oh, forget that. Nope. I'm homeschooling my kid then.
Democratic Senator Charlene Oliver says we won't even know who is in the building with a gun.
Yeah. This
is going to create a whole bunch of anxiety. We're going to keep this discussion going. If you would like to join us, 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842. Leave a comment on the live stream. Stay close. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. We're coming to you across the Civic Media Radio Network.
She gets mad and she starts to cry. She takes a swing, man. She can't help. She don't mean no harm. She just don't know what else to do.
Welcome to Matenaer On Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, and Calvin coming to you from our studio in sunny downtown Waukesha. You can always join us. Call or text at 855-75-CIVIC. Leave a comment on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter. We are talking about what's been going on in Tennessee. Just as a reminder, the Covenant school shooting happened last March 27th, so we're just a little past the year anniversary of that, where 3 9-year-olds and 3 adults at that school were slaughtered. And now Tennessee Senate Republicans passed legislation yesterday allowing public K-12 teachers and school staff to carry concealed handguns on school grounds. And we've also found out that the parents won't necessarily know who is carrying because they won't have to disclose that.
I don't really I don't really know how to respond to that just little morsel, because this isn't the first time we've seen them say, "Hey, arm the teachers," but now they're saying, "Yeah, you don't have to tell them either." Also, what happens if a teacher takes their gun off and puts it in their desk drawer and a kid gets into it? I mean, that happens all the time at home.
That happens with police
Yeah.
officers leaving their weapons in public bathrooms.
Um,
According to the bill, those who wish to carry must first get an enhanced handgun carry permit and complete annual training with law enforcement. Jeff Yarbrough, a senator from Nashville, a Democrat, questioned the limited nature of the training. He said, quote, "We're sending people to 40 hours of training to learn how to handle a combat situation that law enforcement officers have trouble dealing with." And
Yep.
again, I go back to Uvalde.
Yeah.
And what happened in Uvalde. I do not think that it is the responsibility of teachers in our state who have taken the oath to educate our kids to now become law enforcement officers. And also, Bailey, who is one of the sponsor of this bill, what about liability? Because you mentioned that, Greg.
Yeah.
According to him, a teacher or staff member who accidentally shoots someone on school grounds will be solely liable. But he pointed to the 3 elements in the bill that would prevent that scenario. Again, training for the person carrying the gun, a psychiatric evaluation, and a sign off from local law enforcement.
Cool. More paperwork in the eyes of a tragedy. That's really what you need to do after you've accidentally discharged your weapon, injuring and or possibly killing someone, is to file paperwork and have to meet with people to make sure that you don't get. This is so stupid. This is so stupid. All to get around the idea. What's the one thing we don't want to do? We don't want to fund schools to make sure that they are the best, the safest. And does that mean metal detectors? I don't know. Does that mean armed guards? I don't know. Maybe. We had someone who just texted in that said, we do need the armed resource officers back in all schools. I don't agree with that.
Well, and I think there are like 600 schools in Tennessee that don't have school resource officers.
Yeah.
But now we're gonna skip over that. If that's where your starting point is, we're gonna skip over that and then just go right to arming our teachers. Kathy from Milwaukee is on the line. Good morning, Kathy. Thank you so very much for joining us. What do you want to say?
Well, 2 things. One, no teacher wants to carry a gun, and if they do, it's the liability. Where do they keep it? Do they have to take it home at night? What happens if a kid gets into it? Does that mean if the teacher takes it home, now they are more apt to somebody who know where they live? They know they have a gun. Children who want to be comforted by their teacher if somebody comes in. It's not a good idea. I did hear also in Tennessee yesterday, I thought they also wanted to have assault weapons be able to be owned by kids 18. And I know there was a big uproar in the legislation that the people called for a roll call and the legislation walked out on them.
Yeah,
I don't know how many.
Go ahead, Kathy. Sorry.
I was going to say, I don't know how many things we can say about Tennessee because we have open carry in Wisconsin. And I think back to Kyle Rittenhouse, who asked him how old he was when he was walking down those streets? No one.
As he passed
law enforcement. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kathy. Really appreciate your comments. And thank you so very much for listening. 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842. Mike from Muscadet is on the line. Good morning, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking my call. My personal opinion, I think it's a good idea because that thought put in somebody's mind, knowing that there's a potential threat to them. Not saying, okay, this is a gun-free zone, come on in and shoot us. That knowing, people don't go to gun shows and shoot up the place. They don't shoot up places where they know there's a gun or a possibility of a gun. So if that's installed in that person's mind, that's the second thought that might be the deterrent. Because nothing else seems to work.
That is, I'm going to bring up the incident of Gabby Gifford being gunned down, and there are police around when a congressperson is doing an event. A person came to that event with law enforcement around, and she was gunned down, shot in the head. People having guns is no deterrent for somebody who has the intention of going into a place and causing violence. They're not in a right head to make the decision of, well, they have guns there. That's going to keep me from doing it. I'm sorry. I do not accept that as a reason.
I just think, Mike, I don't think, like Greg said, I don't think that is the first thing in their mind. And I don't necessarily think that they're thinking about their own survival. They're thinking about how much damage and carnage they can leave, regardless of the outcome. So I don't know. And again, look at what happened in Uvalde. We had at least 50 officers who were armed, who would not take on that person who had an assault style weapon.
And if this person was in their right mind, why would they go to a place where there are children?
Don Brown on the line. Good morning, Don. Thanks for joining us. We only got about a minute and a half left on.
Yeah, just real quick, Jamie. I'm a huge proponent of student resource officers. That would get rid of any idea of arming teachers or anybody else. And I can speak from personal experience because my daughter was in that classroom on December 2nd, 2019, where there was an incident in the very next classroom. And the student resource officer on duty handled that professionally and actually saved the young man's life in response to into the shooting.
Yep.
And it's been very successful in Waukesha schools. And also they proactively get to know the students and form very strong relations with them so we can get ahead of any incidents. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for your perspective, Don. I don't know where I come down on the school resource officers. I think Don has a point. I think the concern about having them is also valid, but arming teachers this is not the way to fix this mess. This is not the way to fix the gun crisis in this country.
It's not going to keep a mentally ill person from walking into a school and causing it. The gun show comparison, we don't know. I mean, if I look up right now, I'll bet you any amount of money. I'll bet good money that I can find about an incident, someone going to a gun show and causing violence with a gun.
Well, and the other thing that I always take away when we have these discussions, when the NRA has its convention,
yes,
you don't get to bring your guns in
CPAC
to the convention hall.
CPAC, no guns.
What does that tell us?
Yeah.
Shouldn't you all be that much safer if everyone is armed?
You have no problem with your rights being infringed then?
News is on the way next. Stay with us. You can always join the show, 855-75-CIVIC. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.
Under my feet.
Good morning. Welcome to Matenaer On Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, Calvin on the board to screen your calls. If you would like to join the show, you can call or text at 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842. Leave a comment on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We are talking about a measure in Tennessee that would allow teachers to carry this about a year after the Covenant school shooting in Nashville, in which 3 9-year-olds, the headmaster, a custodian, and a substitute teacher were all gunned down in a mass shooting. A large number of Tennessee parents, including some of the Covenant school parents, are very much against this idea of
Yeah.
arming teachers.
Yeah.
And there would be 40 hours of training required. They would have to go through a psychological examination and then have someone from law enforcement sign off. This isn't a requirement. They're not requiring all teachers would be required to carry,
Yeah.
but they are giving the option. Is this a good idea? Is this going to solve the problem of mass shootings at our schools? 855-75-CIVIC. Rebecca from Burlington, thank you so much for your patience, Rebecca. Calvin tells me that you are not only a retired teacher, but you are a firearms instructor.
That is correct. I am both. And I've got what may be, because of those two things, a very different perspective than most people.
I am absolutely, please share it.
Most of my teaching experience, and for the last 20 years, I was a school psychologist. So I've got kind of the whole spectrum here, was in the elementary level, starting with transition from early intervention to early childhood. So I've worked with families of students from age 2.5 through age 13, as well as earlier in my career teaching high school. So I've pretty much hit all of it.
Yep.
As far as keeping schools safer, the last district I worked for, and I would prefer to not name them on the air,
Sure.
simply because an idiot will decide it's a good way to see if he can outthink the system.
Yeah.
What they did was they removed all the pretty little flowers in front of the windows and put in prickly bushes. Kids could still see out, but nobody could get close enough to actually see into the windows. This was done with regular landscape maintenance. It took them 3 years. This year they were taking out this third and putting in the prickly stuff. The next year they took out another third, put in the prickly stuff. So now you have nobody up against the windows. When they redid the interiors of the schools, now they already had lockable fire doors, which everyone had to keep locked.
Mm-hmm.
They made sure that every classroom had lockers and cement walls between the hallway and the classroom, and every room had a different colored carpet wedge. Any person or thing within that wedge could not be seen from the legally required door window, which would make it a safe area.
Wow.
They also set 3 systems for, and again, that was done under routine maintenance. This was not an extra cost.
Right.
They also set, when they redid their tech, the phone system allowed for everyone to do an all call. We were all instructed in doing an all call. Any staff member could do a shelter in place, which is stay wherever you are. That was used once. We had a student who had a heart attack. So that kept everybody out of the halls while the paramedic got the student out. The student survived, did well, came back to us. You could do a shelter in-house. Move around the school. Everything's fine, but don't go outside because something out there is weird. And a shelter storm. Self-explanatory. If there's a big storm coming in, where does your class go? Students practiced those. If you'll notice, there was never a
an active shooter call because we did not want to freak out the kids.
Right.
That was all covered. It was interesting. The first day it was in, our principal insisted that it didn't cover the playground. Wrong, it did, but she made us all do an all call. Stay where you are. Parents heard this from the neighborhood, called the police because they thought we might have a real problem. Police came roaring up to see what was going on. Our principal had egg on her face, but it did prove that the system works.
So, Rebecca, if I can, Rebecca from Burlington is our guest, and we're talking about legislation in Tennessee that would allow teachers to carry concealed weapons. Rebecca, I'm assuming from what you shared that there are other ways to harden our schools, right? By design measures, by making some different safety measures, or are you in favor of arming teachers?
At certain times and places and ways, yes, but it would not be a teacher who has moment-to-moment responsibility for students. I don't want and I've known first grade teachers, kindergarten teachers who are fabulous with their firearms skills and usage, as well as their defensive mindset. But if the worst happens, those kids are going to be crawling all over their teacher. No. You want to arm somebody who does not have moment-to-moment responsibility, a specialist, somebody in the custodial staff, somebody in administration. That's a different situation that can be discussed. But I do not approve of it for the little kids, for anyone in the elementary level, just because those kids, they need to be able to access their teacher.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Thank you so very much for calling, Rebecca, and thank you so much for providing your perspective. It's that's what it's all about, is having discussions about this, at least, and finding out what people's own experiences have been.
Yeah, especially coming from someone, a teacher, psychologist, firearms expert. I don't know, for me personally, about arming anybody in schools. That just still feels like possible danger and whatnot. But I mean, I do understand what she's saying. I absolutely, that makes sense. You know, you don't want to, little kids need
First and second graders,
they need
no.
a parent, and that parent is their teacher during the day.
Yes, they need a surrogate parent. Cam from Nina texting in. Cam from Nina, first time listener. Thanks for joining us, Cam. I'm around 27. I'm telling you, guns in schools are a joke. I remember in middle school, a kid tried to build a bomb. It went off during lunch, but he built it wrong, so it was more of a loud pop. This is a mental health issue entirely, but I also wouldn't be against banning guns from the lead-fried brains of people who can't store them correctly. Another texter from the 920. A lot of these school shooters or mass shooters go into it with the intent of not coming out alive. That was kind of my point a little bit ago.
Yeah.
They either kill themselves or expect to be killed by the police.
Yeah. And I think Don Brown got back to us because he said he just wanted to add to my call that the Black Lives Matter March in Waukesha in June 2020 was a very successful event because the SROs were on duty and established regular communication with students and alumni via social media throughout the event. The marchers even allowed one SRO to address the crowd at the end of the event to celebrate peaceful civil disobedience. Waukesha students view the SROs as role models and friends who've established trust and respect with our youth. I you know what, I love the fact that if that is the case, that the SRO is a successful measure in that school. I just know that there are a lot of other schools and students who have problems with their SROs being draconian and
yes,
and all encompassing in their face. So it while I'm not a huge fan of SROs, I'm not against the idea of SROs. I'm against where they make children feel far more unsafe than they need to. The child should feel safe in school.
yes.
They need to learn, they need to relax, make friends, have fun. Whether, you know, and an SRO can be a hampering to that. And I think we can all agree a person walking in with a gun definitely is. So once again, we're at an impasse. And I said it before, this is about funding. And yes, schools should be protected. And there are, Rebecca said, and you mentioned, there are ways of fortifying schools. So if a person walks in with a weapon, we can lock it down and make it safe. but there are other things we can be doing as well as far as funding these schools to make them safer.
Well, and as Rebecca just pointed out, there are some not terribly complicated things
Yeah.
that could be done as part of regular maintenance. Cam from Nina, we just read your text. Cam, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing?
I'm sorry, I ended up calling in too. I just the last caller. I'm sure that they are an expert in the fields that they are familiar with, and I can respect that, right? Like there's no substitute for me just saying, well, I have my opinion versus your experience in participating in setting these systems up. I understand that, but I also think that in a way, I think that there is an element to this that's not being factored in, and that is it's the amount of mental gymnastics that can be done here that a kid is going to be able to subvert. It's not hard to get through electronically locked doors, which is a lot of the things that these schools are implementing in place of like actual locked key and locked doors. They can easily use devices to get around these. It's the same devices that people are using to get into Kias. I'm not going to name names. I own one of these devices myself. It's not. It's really cheap. You can do it yourself easily. It feels like to me that people are coming up with solutions for a problem that they know what the actual solution is: no firearms. And they're willing to shell out all this money for this and tell teachers you need to be the judge, jury, and executioner in the moment with 30 other children screaming in your ear, terrified, and you also aren't getting a pay raise. Screw you.
Cam, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You said you're 27, right?
Yep.
Well, I understand your statement at the beginning of your call saying you don't have the expertise. You do have a certain expertise that neither Jane nor I have, which is neither one of us went to school when school shootings were happening. You're 27 years old. Whether or not something happened at your school, you still lived with the specter over your head. So that does provide you with a much needed opinion and an expertise that I can't give. I've never done a school shooting drill. I've never gone to school thinking something could happen. Nowadays, that's the sad part. That is the all-encompassing scar of this country we live in. It doesn't matter the color, the age, the gender, anything. We all live in fear that sometime, some point, someone can walk up with a weapon. And the fact that it happens in schools is terrifying. But you do bring an opinion that needs to be heard as someone who has lived through that time. Thank you for calling, Cam. We really appreciate it.
We really do appreciate it. And thank you for listening, Cam. First time listener, really appreciate that too. Just a couple of minutes left. Sam from Madison has been waiting. Good morning, Sam. Thanks for your patience.
Hey, Jane and Greg. I'm not a teacher, but I was a camp counselor for a number of years at a Boy Scout camp up in Rhinelander. And 2 summers ago, we had a shooting scare. Some kid, as a prank, called in, but we didn't realize that till much later in the day. And this was like during breakfast, and we had to basically hurry hundreds of kids down into the basement. And the Oneida County Sheriff, they had like a very quick and insane response. They brought in a SWAT team and everything. But at a scout camp, like you deal with guns and whatnot, but that's always at like a shooting range.
Right.
And to have guns in the hands of teachers, like even I'm a hunter, but like I get just nervous and all that whenever I'm handling a gun because it's a weapon.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want teachers doing that and having those even just sitting around. I would say it'd be a much better idea to just train law enforcement to the T, because at least with the situation that I experienced, they had an incredible response. And even though it wasn't a real situation, if it had been real, it would have gone like
they were ready for it.
Obviously, it's not a good right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Sam. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, but we're coming up against the break. And Lynn from Oconomowoc, thank you for calling. We're not going to be able to get to you. When we return, we're going to talk to Tom, a Wisconsin Republican voter against Trump. Stay close. You're listening to Matenaer On Air on the Civic Media Radio Network. Good morning and welcome to Matenaer On Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, Calvin is here to screen your calls. We're broadcasting live from downtown Waukesha. You can always join us at 855-75-CIVIC or leave a comment on the live stream, Facebook, YouTube, what used to be Twitter, or you can shoot us an email too at janesays@civicmedia.us, JANESAYS, Jane Says at civicmedia.us. A couple of weeks ago, we talked to Gunnar Raymer, who is with the group called Republican Voters Against Trump. And we had the opportunity to talk to a couple of Wisconsin residents who have done testimonials for this organization. You may have seen it, depending upon what you watch, that they show up on YouTube, and they certainly are on my Twitter feed. And we're very grateful to have Tom from Wisconsin is joining us, who also did one of those testimonials for Republican Voters Against Trump. Good morning, Tom. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Good morning, Jane. Thank you for inviting me.
Tom, tell us, first of all, a little bit about, were you a lifelong Republican voter?
Well, I've been a lifelong conservative. My entire life, I've believed in conservative politics, and really not so much a political partisan when it comes to parties. When I was younger, both Democrat and Republican parties had conservatives and liberals in both parties. So I really didn't intend to lean on one particular party, but basically a conservative philosophy.
And did you vote for Donald Trump in 2016?
Well, I guess you could say I voted for him in 2016 and 2020. I actually voted against Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden.
And what was the final straw for you to do this testimonial for Republican Voters Against Trump?
Well, Trump had the opportunity when he was running for president and after he was elected president to make America great again, like he had promised. And unfortunately, his narcissism, I think, got the better of him. And Trump, in my opinion, is for Trump. But there are two major things that prohibit me from voting for Trump again. One is his comments about termination of parts of the Constitution after he lost the last election. The only thing that separates us from communist countries and dictatorships and banana republics is our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And because he lost the election, he then talked about terminating parts of the Constitution, basically promoting his lie that he won the election. So I could never vote again for someone who doesn't see our Constitution and our Bill of Rights as being sacred. Second thing is his, and I think it's more than my perception, his loyalty to Russia. I just see an overwhelming body of evidence that he places Russian interests above American interests. Most recently, he encouraged our Russia to attack our NATO allies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And our NATO is the premier military arm that prevents Russian invasion of Europe. And for him to encourage our encourage Russia to attack our allies is just so irresponsible. And I hope it was not a serious comment, but I don't know how to take this man. He's a bully. He admires dictators. He admires Vladimir Putin and the Korean dictator Jong-un. I think he, in his own mind, would like to be one. Fortunately, we do have a constitution that precludes that from happening. But I'm tired as a conservative voter and a person who believes in our Constitution. I'm tired of voting against people and voting for the lesser of evils So this election, I'm going to vote for neither Biden or Trump. I'm going to write in my candidates.
We are talking to
I think
Tom.
that
I'm sorry,
when
Tom.
you-
We're talking to Tom from Wisconsin. He has done a testimonial for Republican voters against Trump. We will provide a link in the show notes if you would like to go and look at some of those. Tom, I'm going to go back to something that you just said. Are you not concerned though if you do a write-in that is essentially a throwaway and that's one more vote that could have gone to Joe Biden to make sure Donald Trump doesn't get reelected?
Well, I guess our perception is somewhat different, Jane. I see Donald Trump as a threat to our American freedoms, and I see Joe Biden as an even greater threat. Joe Biden, with his open borders and foreign policy, I think is even a greater threat. But I'm tired of voting for the lesser of evils, and I can give a number of examples where I think Biden's actions have demonstrated his unfitness for being president of the United States. I mean, I think it's outrageous that he is lecturing Israel on how to deal with terrorism when he himself is incapable of dealing with it. He's the only one in the Obama White House that was against going in and taking out Osama bin Laden. He's been wrong on every foreign policy position he's ever taken.
Well, Tom, I'm
Certainly.
gonna stop you there just for a second, and I want to go back to what you were saying about NATO, because Donald Trump, even in his first administration, said that he wanted to withdraw from NATO, and at least say what you will about Joe Biden and the disagreements that you have with the current president, he will keep us in NATO, and we're going to talk to retired Brigadier General Steve Anderson tomorrow on the show, specifically about the importance of NATO and what America leaving that would mean. We have news coming up next. Tom, thank you so very, very much for talking to us today. I genuinely appreciate your time and your perspective, and I hope we can call on you again before the election. Stay with us. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network. morning and welcome to Matenaer On Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, Sweet Kelby on the board, coming to you from our studio in downtown Waukesha. If you want to join the show, call, text 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842, or leave a comment on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and the platform that Elon is effectively ruining. Just a reminder to download the wonderful and free Civic Media app wherever you get your apps. That allows you to listen to all of our stations all across the network, all the various shows, because there are different morning shows in some places where you listen, WISS in Oshkosh, Mano and the Mayor in Green Bay. So all you have to do is download the wonderful Civic Media app, and then you can call and text directly to whatever station you're listening to. It's pretty cool.
Text us.
Yeah, text us too. You can always text 855-75-CIVIC. Now that Dr. Kristen Lyerly has announced she is running for the 8th Congressional District, she handed her speculum over to Dr. Laura Hanks, who's going to join us now every Wednesday at 11:33 for the public service announcement. And if you have any health-related questions, does not have to be OBGYN related, she can address those as well.
Yeah.
So you can always send those in to Jane Says at civicmedia.us. We're going to start off the hour, though, welcoming Arizona to the 1860s. Arizona's highest court Tuesday upheld an 1864 law banning nearly all abortions. Physicians are now on notice that all abortions, except those necessary to save a woman's life, are illegal, and they could face 2 to 5 years in prison.
Is that terrible? Without a doubt. But is it weird that in my head I also think, oh, but at least back in those days they said, but for the life of the mother.
But this goes back to none of that's been codified. How close to death does she have to be? 75%? 60%? Half and half? When do we decide she is sick enough or close enough to death that I need to do this procedure to save her life? None of that is codified.
Are you telling me that the Arizona Supreme Court didn't wade into that minutia at all?
No, shockingly.
Oh, that's...
Democrats in Arizona condemning it as a stain that will put women's lives at risk. Several Republicans, according to this article in the New York Times, sensing political peril, are now criticizing the ruling and calling for the GOP-controlled legislature to repeal it because they're not afraid. They know this is not a popular position.
I got one word, 2 syllables. It's smack in the middle of this country. Kansas. Kansas,
of all places,
voted to keep abortion access.
Kansas.
When Kansas does that. And
they came out en masse.
Yes. And good on you, Arizona GOP members, for really thinking about the health and wealth of the mother and the choice of women. No, this had to do with your electability.
Yeah. Now they're concerned they're going to lose.
Yeah.
So now they're backtracking on it.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, of course, is out today saying, yep, I killed Roe. Isn't that great? I killed Roe.
And I did whatever all experts wanted me to do. They all wanted me. Both sides wanted me to do it, guys.
No, that's not
but
accurate.
Jane, everyone on both sides. You see, there's one side that said kill it, and then the other side that said kill it. So that's what I did. I killed it because I am the greatest killer of rights there is. I'm Donald Trump.
In poll after poll, most Americans, nearly two-thirds of respondents in multiple polls wish Roe would have been preserved. A CNN poll in 2023, 64% opposed the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe, almost identical to a poll the year earlier. A Marquette Law School poll in February of this year, 67% of adults opposed the decision that overturned Roe versus Wade.
Do you know who said it shouldn't be overturned and it was, codified in law and protected and not worthy of talking about? The last 3 Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
So that's where
You mean the last, Amy Coney Barrett,
who
Brett
else?
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Neil Gorsuch.
Yes.
During their confirmation hearings, all said that Roe was established precedent and therefore would be left alone. They lied.
But Jane, here's something we didn't notice when they were doing their testimonies. their fingers were crossed behind their backs. We didn't notice that. That's
So
on us.
that's
That's our fault.
okay.
Our fault.
That's
Sorry,
their
guys.
get out of jail free card. Cindy from Appleton is on the line. Good morning, Cindy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I don't know how you give these Republicans who are backpedaling now any credibility because, like you said, they where's the concern for the woman and the mother, the child, whatever? There's no concern for that. It's only concern about their hypocritical views of make sure they're reelected. And I swear to God, if any of these people get reelected, they're just going to come back and backpedal again and then repeal what they unrepealed.
Oh yeah.
So I don't trust those people at all. They're just a bunch of hypocritical liars.
For the record, any credit I may have been giving them was purely in jest and smothered in sarcasm.
We do that sometimes, Cindy. You know that. You're my sarcasm soul sister. Thank you so much, Cindy. Really appreciate you listening. Speaking of the flip-floppers, Carrie Lake.
Oh, you mean the person who didn't win?
The Carrie Lake who always looks like she's coming from heaven or something because of the whatever filter she uses on her camera. I would like to find that filter. I could use it. Carrie Lake said yesterday, quote, "I have traveled to every corner of this state on the campaign trail. I speak to more Arizonans than anyone, and it is abundantly clear that the pre-statehood law is out of step with Arizonans. However, 2 years ago, just weeks before they overturned Roe versus Wade, Carrie Lake called the 1864 ban in Arizona a great law during a GOP candidate forum. And now that it's happened, oh, no, I didn't mean that.
Not that law.
Not that law.
Not that law.
Polling shows Arizona voters still support a woman's right to choose. To a certain point, Republicans could have made the case that 15 weeks is a fair compromise. But because the hard right runs the legislature in Arizona, the 1864 ban remained on the books.
Yeah.
So well done. Ron from Milwaukee is on the line. Good morning, Ron. Thank you so much for joining us. What did you want to say?
Boy, it gets more and more ridiculous. Not only did Trump make that blanket claim, I made this happen. I made overturning Roe v. Wade happen. The next day, that was yesterday that he said that apparently at some point. And last night and this morning, his campaign has been busy trying to pull that back as best they can.
Oh yeah,
because that's sort of if you think about it, for everybody except his hardcore, which is a small percentage of a percentage, everybody else, that's a killer. If you're running for president and saying, "I made Roe v. Wade happen, are you happy?" And we aren't. So they're busy backpedaling. All these other people, like Carrie Lake in the Lake of Fire, and backpedaling. All these people,
wow,
or she should be in the Lake of Fire at some point, along with Donald. All these people are now backpedaling, and the moderates are just sitting there because now what do we do? Now we're really screwed.
Yep.
Moderate Republicans, but I use that with quotation marks because
Yep.
they're conservative Republicans who just are crazy conservative Republicans. What a spit show.
That's our promo for today, Ron. Thank you for that. It is a spit show, and it's a problem of their own making.
Yeah.
And as Cindy said right before you, the Carrie Lakes and the ones who are backtracking from this now, if they are reelected, they will backtrack again and go back to that complete ban. They can't stop flip-flopping. It's about getting elected and staying in that sweet spot.
Only on this topic have I seen politicians manage to paint themselves into two corners at the same time. They're like, they have to appease their pro-life side, but then they have to be smart and be sensible and realize, oh, this sort of extreme law will get me kicked out of office.
Yep.
So they have to appease both sides, and they can't because one side doesn't trust them. The other side will.
Well, the other side wants all or nothing. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for calling, Ron, and thank you so very much for listening. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the far right want everything. It's my way or the highway.
But also if they come out and say, well, we need to look at some of the measures, the people on the other side say, you're lying. We know you're lying because we know what your record's been for years. And all of a sudden, you built this monster and the monster's banging down the door and you don't know what to do. We've been trying to tell you for years now, but you wouldn't listen.
Talking about the decision in Arizona yesterday, where the Supreme Court there upheld an 1864 law banning nearly all abortions, no exceptions for rape or incest, except there are exceptions for to save a woman's life. Although again, those are not specified,
Yeah.
and so there's lots of questions there. And what doctor now facing a potential 2 to 5 years in prison?
Mm.
What doctor is gonna take that chance?
Yeah. No, I mean,
And that's I think that's by design.
yeah.
They just want it rather than come out and say, okay, she has to be 75% close to death, because that's going to make them look pretty bad. So this way they just leave it ambiguous, and the threat alone of potential legal repercussions will take care of itself.
Once again, as we've said before, they built this monster and now they have to contain it, and they're not, because they didn't have just the basic. I mean, it's the same discussion we were having earlier about guns. We talk about it all the time. People en masse want sensible gun laws.
Yes.
It's been pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled. And for some reason,
For at least a decade.
oh, longer. And for some reason, a small group of people get to say, no, that's not it. It's all or nothing, and it's freedom, and it's the Constitution. Same thing with abortion. Very sensible Republicans and conservatives understand there needs to be access to abortion for some things. What we agree on may not be a lot, but there are some agreements. But for some reason, nope. A small group of people can say all or nothing,
Yep.
and here we are.
Here we are.
Mass shootings and no abortions and access
We're
in Arizona.
back to the 1860s.
Oh, and boy, howdy.
And we're going to talk a little bit more just about how good things were
Back in the old days.
in the 1860s. Stay close. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.
She gets mad and she starts to cry. She takes a swing, man. She can't help. She don't mean no harm. She just don't know what else to do about it. Jane said.
Good morning and welcome to Matenaer On Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, Calvin, coming to you live from our studio in downtown Waukesha. You can join the conversation, call or text at 855-75-CIVIC, or leave a comment on the live stream if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and or Twitter. Baseball fans, Brewers at the Reds tonight, 5:05, and you can catch the game from News from the Center, WRCE in Richland Center, and also 98Q Country, WCQM in Park Falls, 98.3 FM. Brewers and the Reds tonight, 5:05. We started off the hour talking about the Arizona Supreme Court yesterday, basically instituting an abortion ban from 1864. Last hour, we had the opportunity to talk to a Wisconsin voter who has done a testimonial for Republican voters against Trump. Really appreciate Tom taking the time out to talk to us. And I didn't expect we would agree on everything. We didn't agree on everything, but that's part of the whole idea is to have different discussions so we can learn the things that we do agree on. But the one thing that Tom said is that he's going to be writing in a candidate because he believes Joe Biden is actually a bigger threat than Donald Trump, but he doesn't support Donald Trump. So he is going to do a write in. And a texter listening in Madison, I have a real problem with people writing in a candidate or not voting. I'm 83. I have voted since I was 18. Only about twice was I happy about my presidential choice. We need to vote for the good of the country as a whole and quit whining about everything we are not getting. And I thank you so much for that text. And I agree with you. We have two choices. That's all we have.
Yes.
It's Trump or Biden. That's it. RFK Jr. is a spoiler
Yes.
to pull votes away from Biden to clear the way for Donald Trump. We heard one of his campaign officials yesterday in New York State essentially stating that.
And frankly, we should be playing that once a week from now until the election, so no one never hears it again. Also, voting to make a point to a sitting president isn't a way of voting. Sorry, there are other ways of doing it. You write, you march, you call, you influence. If you have influence, you use that influence. But simply saying, nope, I don't like this president because of this one thing. Well, guess what? You now make it harder for a lot of other people. Sorry, I don't respect that.
If you are concerned about a second Trump term, any vote for someone other than Joe Biden is effectively ensuring that Donald Trump will get a second term.
Yeah.
I just think I think that's it.
We don't want to scare you, even though it's scary, and we're not threatening you, but it just seems like the logical step. And I'm holding back frustration.
We're going to go back to our discussion about Arizona and the Arizona Supreme Court going back to in 1864 rule banning abortion. And it got us talking before we got on the air, Greg and I, just kicking things around about general medical practices in the 1860s.
Yeah.
Since this law sprung from the 1864.
Before we got in the medical thing, I wanted to start with a little light fun.
Okay.
I thought I'd find out what you could find for $1 in 1864. Because you could spend that money on something. I mean, you can't have access to basic medical care. If you had $1, you could buy a dozen pigeons back in 1864.
Oh, $1. That's a lot of pigeons.
3 quarts of whiskey, 3 pounds of butter, 6 pounds of salt pork. That's what $1 would get you back in those days. But
nice.
That quality medical care back in those days in 1860.
Not so much.
I wouldn't say, well, I don't want to besmirch the talent of those doctors. I bet you they were very good at these tactics.
They did what their best, right?
Yeah, but we did some digging.
Yeah.
We used those resources here at Matenaer On Air, and we found out that some of the practices back in 1864, things like bloodletting.
Very popular.
Very popular.
For those who don't know, they would actually cut open your veins or a vein and let the blood drain for a while because that was to get all the bad booga booga stuff out of you.
What's that again?
That is the Latin term, booga booga stuff.
Ooh, booga booga.
And yes, like, bad humors or whatever they used to call it. So yeah, they would drain your blood and expect that that's gonna get you back on your feet.
And then I went and looked up, has bloodletting ever killed anybody? Well, it killed someone pretty famous.
It did.
Our first president was killed from bloodletting.
George Washington.
The same guy. He was killed when they bloodlet 5 pints of blood out of his body, which for a man we're about the same height. He weighed less, but he had about 11, 12 pints of blood.
So that's half his blood.
Pretty much to get the bad stuff out, get that bad O's out.
Yeah.
Another thing they would do, blistering.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
I had never heard of blistering before, and I looked it up. This is the scientific definition from the University of Toledo. Blistering involves placing hot plasters onto the skins to raise blisters, which were then drained. The most common purgative was calomel, a form of mercuric chloride, which never sounds good. which worked as a laxative in small doses, but usually was prescribed in large doses to purge the system. 1864 medicine. And then finally, and Jane, you were able to say this one. You were able to describe this one better than me. High doses of mineral poisons, which was
I think they used mercury.
Yeah,
I think they used to actually give people mercury.
Just wonderful. But
it was cutting edge science back in
cutting edge
1864.
And you might be sitting here saying, Greg, Jane, Calvin, why would I go back in time and expose myself to such shoddy medical practices? Well, I have an upside for you. Do not worry, because in 1864, at that point, doctors were not only washing their instruments finally, but they were also washing their hands.
What a relief.
Phew!
I feel so much better about medical advice now coming from the 1860s because they were finally washing their medical instruments and, their hands.
I just hope they're in my network.
What would have been the equivalent of an HMO in the 1860s? Matt from Middleton has been hanging on the line. Thank you for your patience, Matt. What did you want to say? We do have just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the whole Trumpism stuff and taking rights away from people. This is all about a minority trying to rule over the majority, and that's why we're seeing all this violence and intimidation. And the way that the MAGA kind of pushed out the rest of the Republicans, because they always go after their own first. And I think if Trump gets back in, we'll just see a lot more violence and intimidation, because that's the only way that minority holds on to control. And you see it in a lot of other countries as well.
Yep. You make a great point, Matt. You really do. And that's why we are going to continue talking about a write-in candidate or a vote for Bob Kennedy is merely a vote for Donald Trump. Thank you so much for calling. Really appreciate it.
I just like the idea of this 1864. Is this doctor in my network? You can get all those surgeries for a quarter.
Well,
one shiny
maybe
quarter.
a nickel. All right. We're going to continue the medical discussion. And if you have a question for Dr. Laura Hanks, please text it in or email it in. News is next. And then when we return, public service announcement. Stay with us. You're listening to Matenaer On Air on the Civic Media Radio Network.
Speak your mind, but not on my time. I don't care what you say anymore. This is my life. So, honey, please come on home as soon as you can. Doctor's orders say.
Good morning. Welcome to Matenaer On Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, Dr. Slide on the board here to screen your calls at 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842. Leave a comment on the live stream. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, she took over the speculum last week from Dr. Kristen Lyerly, and we're very excited to have her back. Dr. Laura Hanks is here for our public service announcement. Good morning, Dr. Hanks. How you doing?
Good morning. Doing great. Good to see you guys again.
I loved
Good
your
to see you
text. I loved your text this morning because you said that your parents wanted to watch on the live stream. So, good morning, Mom and Dad Hanks. I hope you're watching, and I hope your daughter looks terrific. So.
Finally, you have something to be proud of your daughter for. You've made it. Matenaer On Air.
Yeah, all those years of medical school and stuff. Yeah, but now she's on the radio. So.
Yeah.
My girl's famous.
I don't. You're a very busy doctor, so I don't know that you had the chance, Dr. Hanks, to listen before you joined us. But we were talking about the decision by the Arizona Supreme Court yesterday to essentially outlaw all abortions, no exceptions for rape or incest. Yes, there is an exception for the life of the mother. What that actually entails, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it hasn't been very strictly codified because I think they want to create the confusion so that doctors are going to be afraid to perform any kind of life-saving procedure in order to stay out of prison. But I wanted to start here, and I don't do this very often because I don't need all the hate. But every once in a while, I will go to our YouTube page, and they put together, our social media team does a great job of taking short clips from the shows every once in a while just to give an idea of some of the things that we're talking about. And there was a 60-second clip where we were talking with Dr. Lyerly about abortions and why abortions are necessary and in what circumstances they are necessary. And not only was I kind of mortified by the amount of comments that just said, just close your legs. Just close your legs and you won't have that problem. But the other thing that really stunned me, Dr. Hanks, was the amount of misinformation
Yeah.
about the circumstances when abortion is needed. There are people who say abortion is never, never necessary, ever. Yes, it is.
Yeah. I have so many comments on that. One of my favorite memes that I saw about abortions recently that was like the number one reason someone gets an abortion is none of your business. The second is none of your business, and the so on and it's so true. But to the Arizona point too, it seems like they kind of took a page out of our handbook, unfortunately, and even in that New York Times article, they actually
she just froze a little bit,
which was a little bit embarrassing. Oh, that's
okay. You're back.
Yeah. And just, we lived that. We had to go through that here in Wisconsin, following a law that was literally written by frickin' candlelight, like at a time when there weren't ultrasounds, when there weren't, and you're just like trying to interpret that and what that means. And it was scary for us and for our patients. And how the heck do we counsel? And what we talked a lot about during that time of kind of confusion and chaos, which is, what the hope is that comes from this, is what do you do when a patient comes in? And this is just one of many circumstances that happens all the time when somebody breaks their water at 17, 18 weeks. So we call viability when a baby can live on the outside of mom. It really depends on where you are in the country too. Some people will offer it as early as 22 weeks. Some people 23, 24 was kind of the traditional number for a long time, but we've been pushing that back a little bit. But regardless, before that number, the baby cannot survive on the outside, right? So what happens when they break their water? So when someone breaks their water, they're at risk for getting an infection. The baby needs that fluid around for their lungs to develop. So the chance of them being able to get lung development when the water breaks too early is also compromised. And there were a couple of studies that came out just recently looking at what happens specifically when in these instances when a patient breaks their water earlier. And one study found that the live birth rate after you break your water is only 44%. So the live birth rate is 44%. The chance that the baby's going to survive to discharge, 26%.
Oh my.
Okay. So then you look at like, what about mom? So yeah, this is horrible that these babies are going to pass away, or the majority of them are, right? But then the mom's at risk for infection, it's just sitting there with kind of like, open to the elements for lack of a better word. But so the risk of a mom having there was another study that looked at like, okay, let's look at like the chance of the baby surviving and the mom not having some sort of morbidity. So only 15% of moms are going to avoid having a morbidity and having a baby go home with them. So like this when this happened in Wisconsin, when we had our archaic law that we were trying to work under, we were like, what are we going to tell these patients that have these, that this is, because we would offer terminate that's what our guidelines say, is that to offer termination for the life and health of the mother. But are we going to consider this the life and health of the mother? And these are the questions that are very real and we have to think about. And I talk about a lot with my friend. They're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. And I'm like, that's my life. That's what I have to think about all the time, and my patients' lives. And not only is this the worst day of their life, but now I have to go in and make them feel guilty because I'm operating on under this archaic law so that I don't go to prison. Like, it's just obscene.
Dr. Laura Hanks is our guest for our public service announcement. And we're talking just in general about abortion. This after the Arizona Supreme Court yesterday kicked back their abortion rules to 1864. Of course, Wisconsin, when Roe fell, went back to 1849. So we We beat them by a couple of years. Yay. Yay us,
Cool.
I guess. But then I was referring to some of the comments I've seen on some of our Civic Media channels and this show in particular. And again, just very basically, Dr. Hanks, a spontaneous miscarriage is called an abortion, correct?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of kind of reevaluation of how we, how we use our wording, and it is called the def is a spontaneous abortion. Okay, and we've had patients that have come back and said, "Why is this on my chart? I didn't have an abortion." And it's like, well, I mean, that's what a miscarriage is called, and so that's always been the medical
Right.
terminology,
Right.
but it's been brought up a lot
Demonized.
more now because people
Yeah.
are, very scared by what happened with the Dobbs decision, and of course just created more confusion, and having to have these discussions with our parents again. Someone that's going through a miscarriage is also often very sad, and and having to go through these details, and right after the Dobbs decision, so many of my patients were just so scared to even talk to me, afraid that they couldn't talk to me. And that's so unfair. It's so heartbreaking. And I can't stress it enough. It's just not right.
Well, depending on whatever man you talk to, and I say that very specifically.
Hi, I'm one. What's up?
Whatever man you talk to, what is his name? Lou Dobbs.
That's his name.
That's his name. I'm sorry. Larry Kudlow on Fox News yesterday. Sorry, wrong man. Larry Kudlow on Fox News yesterday had a guest on who's a conservative radio talker, and they were talking about this Arizona decision. And Calvin, I would like you to play that clip because according to these men, this isn't such a big deal.
That's what it is to be pro-choice. The states can decide. If you had to travel to another state to get an abortion, it's not the worst thing in the world. Hopefully, this is a very rare occurrence in your life. Once in your life, maybe you would do it. Buying a bus ticket to go somewhere to get it is not the worst thing in the world.
Come on, girls, it's just a bus ticket. You might be bleeding internally, but it's just a bus ticket. Come on.
So that's such a privileged response, first of all. Second of all, it's not the pro-choice. It's not pro-life. It's anti-choice. Let's not mix words.
Confuse the two.
If you were pro-life, then you would be supportive once these babies were born, and that's a whole different, not really a whole different discussion, but a very related discussion. But this argument drives me insane because when you look at the maps of where abortion is restricted, and if you live in Mississippi. It's not a bus ticket.
Several buses.
Far, and it's so privileged to think that people that all of our patients can even afford a bus ticket. And like you said, not to mention the risk of if they're bleeding or if there is something wrong, if there is, if it is for the life of the mother, it's obscene. I had a patient that during the Dobbs decision had to travel to Illinois because her baby had the chromosome abnormality. And I don't know if everyone knows this, but when you're pregnant, you have higher risk of blood clots. And if you sit for a long time, that's going to make that risk higher. She got a blood clot because she couldn't get the care she needed in the state that she lived in. It's just obscene that we're putting our patients through this because some guy thinks they can just get on a bus. We're endangering our patients, and it's just obscene.
Dr. Laura Hanks is our guest for our public cervix announcement. Andrew in Maine on a live stream, and I would like you to address this. I bet Dr. Lyerly and Dr. Hanks would say that being pregnant alone is a threat to a woman's health. That is the most dangerous thing a woman can do, is it not?
Personally, my pregnancy's almost killed me. I love my kids, but I can't get pregnant again. I had to go get IVIG infusion, which don't even get, those are $60,000 a pop. I had the 1 in 50,000 disorder you get in pregnancy. And so I don't I truly think if I had another pregnancy, it might kill me. And
it would kill you.
And it's just, like, and that's, my choice to be pregnant or not, and, do with my body. But there are a lot of patients out there that, have even more common disorders that can be life-threatening. And the risk of just delivery in general is so much more high risk than having a termination, if that's what they were to choose. It's a medical or surgical. It is much less risky than going to a term pregnancy and giving birth.
And the thing that's very infuriating to me as a guy and someone in hearing the words of that man, uh, hearing you talk about the fact that you went through what you went through with your pregnancies, there are people out there who, instead of feeling empathy towards your situation and applying it to the possible experience of other women out there, they'll instead say, see what she went through, and she did, you know what I mean? Like there's that,
You survived it.
They twist it every time. They take it and they make it their own. You're like, you're not getting the point. We're trying to protect people's lives. You're quote unquote pro-life, but you apparently are not when we have situations like this.
Well, and I can guarantee you the guy who left the comment who said, just close your legs. He's the one who thinks that every single pregnancy is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And every woman's pregnancy is experienced in exactly the same way. And they simply are not. We are going to continue dispelling some of this misinformation out there with Dr. Laura Hanks and our public service announcement. Stay close. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. This is the vast Civic Media Radio Network.
Please say you understand how I feel, honey. I know you got a lot of things on your mind. Oh, but I'm missing you so bad. Please. Oh, please, come on home. Welcome back to Matenaer On Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, Calvin coming to you from our studio in downtown Waukesha. Join the conversation. Call, text at 855-75-CIVIC. Leave a comment on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and or Twitter. Dr. Laura Hanks is with us every Wednesday now from 11:30 to 12 for our public service announcement. And we've been talking about the Arizona Supreme Court decision, essentially kicking back to an abortion ruling from 1864 and talking about misinformation in general about abortion and abortion care. It is health care. I did want to say, Andrew in Maine says on the live stream, Jane, isn't most of the misinformation more accurately Mr. Misinformation? And I would say yes, except, and I had brought this up with Dr. Lyerly a few months ago. I was listening to Todd Alba talking about the same thing, and a woman called in, very nice lady, and she was obviously very sincere. And she said, well, they're not expecting women to carry a baby that's dead, are they? Right? And he said, no, they are. They are. If you are in some states and your child has already died in the womb, rather than letting you go get health care for that, you have to carry it to term and then deliver your dead child.
Yeah. I mean,
it sounds like something out of a horror movie.
It does. And I think that that's a lot of the misinformation too, is the people can't fathom some of the things that we see in our clinics, and it's hard to think of kind of the worst possible scenario. When I was going through medical school, and you go through your different rotations to decide what you want to go into, and I remember loving OBGYN because so many times you'd leave the room and say congratulations instead of I'm sorry, right? But when things go wrong, they go really wrong, and they can be really scary really fast. And you don't want to think about that. You know, like on our daily conversation, dinner conversations. I'm like the worst at dinner conversations, by the way. My husband knows.
Same. Absolutely the same.
We were on vacation, side note, just because we need a little bit of light. We were on vacation a couple years ago, and my brother-in-law kind of like awkwardly walked away from a conversation. I was like, what's his problem? My mom was like, I don't think you realize how often you use the word vagina in regular conversation.
Oh,
too much at lunch. Too much at lunch.
I know what you're talking about. When we were having that nice bit of warm weather a month and a half ago, people are like, "Oh, I love this weather," and my first reaction would be like, "The Earth is on fire."
That's what my husband always says. Yeah. I know we're the Debbie Downers, but yeah, I digress. But back to kind of the kind of more heavy stuff. But it is. You know, we see a lot of sad stuff, and not often, but when we do, it's just like it's still a person. It's still somebody that's going to have to go through this, and that's where I feel like a lot of these laws are like, well, that doesn't happen that often. You know, like the majority of people will be just fine. You're like, no, but that even if it's that one patient, that's a person that had to.
What if it's your daughter or your sister or your wife? I keep thinking back to that poor woman in Texas whose baby was not going to make it. She had to sit through counseling on what she should do to put her child up for adoption rather than get accurate medical care. She was put through agony.
Yeah.
And the child was not going to live, and she had to sit through that.
Yeah.
Like she had a choice. How unkind can we be?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when there was a case in Ireland like 10 years ago. It was a dentist, I think, who, when they used to have the strict abortion laws.
Right.
And I remember hearing about that, and we, you know, in my circles talked about that, like how she, you know, died because she couldn't get a termination for, you know, a baby that wasn't going to survive.
She had sepsis, right? She had sepsis.
She did. Yep. And I just remember like that was so ingrained, like, oh, I can't imagine living in a place. And like, that's our everyday now. In the United States. And so to say, you know, I hear all the time, well, the Dobbs, it didn't outlaw abortions. It, you know, just go to another state, like the clip said. Like I hear that, you know, from, you know, and it's just like, that's not, no, that someone is suffering. And if they need care right now, they need care right now.
Well, and it amazes me that they can just be so flippant about it.
Right.
Yeah, you know, oh, it's just a bus ticket. And it's the whole, and I said this with the colleagues I was working with at the time when the decision about Dobbs was leaking, and they're like, you're late. You guys are overreacting. You girls are overreacting. You
Oh,
need
yeah.
to calm down.
Quit being so emotional.
Yeah.
Well, and to kind of relate something we discussed earlier at the beginning of the show, it's a very weird thing to say out loud, but gun control is also linked to healthcare, of course. And you take people through these situations where horrible things are happening to teachers, children, family, in talking about abortion access, women making these horrible decisions that are going to affect their lives forever, and you have just people standing back going, give a teacher a gun, they can go to another state. This
You want to talk
total
about
lack of
pro-life?
Yeah.
this total lack of empathy and more of logic too. Like this just dropping of logic, because you just can't say, oh, maybe we should just make it a skosh easier, a little bit easier. But no, you can't do that. You have to say, they'll get a bus ticket and they'll drive to another state. It's fine. Don't worry about it. They'll watch a movie.
Andrew in Maine just put on a live stream. Is your 911 system too slow responding to your emergency? Just drive to another state or get a bus ticket.
Yeah.
I'm sure your heart attack will be fine.
Yeah.
All right, we're just about out of time. We have news coming up next. Dr. Laura Hanks joins us every Wednesday from 11:30 to 12 for our public service announcement. If you have a question for her, send it in. Email it to janesays@civicmedia.us, and we will continue our conversation next week. Thank you so much, Dr. Hanks. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Great to see you again.
You as well. Thank you, Greg and Calvin. Without you guys, nothing works. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for calling and for texting. It means the world. It really does. I hope you find some joy today and you have the chance to share it. Stay right here. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.